Welcome to the Brew World Order podcast. My name is Mike Curtin. This is episode 71, and today's guest is Collin Castore, co-owner of Seven Sun Brewing Company in Columbus, Ohio. Excuse me. Collin, how's it going, man?
It's going great. Thanks for having me on to talk about beer.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. So, you opened in April of 2013 with your two friends from eighth grade, Jen
Yeah.
Burton, Travis Spencer. Happy
Yep.
nine-year anniversary, by the way. I know you
Thank
just
you very
celebrated
much.
9 years.
Yeah.
Um, so what was that moment for the three of you that kind of stuck out? That was the kind of that aha moment that made you guys want to open up Seven Sun.
So both Jen and I came from a restaurant background. She was kind of working at a wine bar. I owned a restaurant before that was one of the first kind of 50 tap places in Columbus, Ohio that was really into craft beer and everything. And Travis was a lawyer, but he had homebrewed a tiny bit. But we just kind of looked at everything, and the restaurant that I decided that I didn't really want to mess with kitchens anymore, but I really like the drink side and the bar side of it a little bit more.
Okay.
And Travis and Jen, and we were all kind of sitting in Jen's backyard at the time, and just kind of had the thing like we can do this, we can handle this, like why not give it a shot? Um,
Right.
and we all really love beer. We love the idea of having our own business and what craft breweries represent as far as not just being like, and I can kind of feel it with the restaurant a little bit too. Like it's a restaurant. It's not necessarily as much of like a community center or a kind of space for the whole neighborhood. And the way breweries were coming up and representing really like third spaces for people and kind of neighborhood centers in an odd way. Like I think that appealed to us a lot. We were all like, yeah, this sounds like a fun thing. Like people in it's what Sam Calagione used to say. People in breweries are still, and I think it still holds true. Like 99% not assholes. Like
Right.
it's a fun business to be in overall, and we liked the people of it. We liked the fact it could be a part of kind of a new developing neighborhood, and we like the beer. And it just kind of hit us. We're like, yeah, we should give this a go.
Very cool. And how did you guys wind up coming up with the name for Seven Sun?
So that we were actually going around and around about what we wanted to name the brewery because nothing, and we noticed this with our other couple of project breweries too. Like nothing really feels right until it exists, and then you're like, oh yeah, that one makes sense. But that
Yeah.
that naming's pretty horrible sometimes. And we had gone back to there's a brewery in Columbus pre-prohibition called Brewing Company, and we thought you could do some catchy things with that. And and we started to look into trademarks. And Born on Dating is Miller or Budweiser, Miller, giant conglomerate, and they're rather litigious. And they own Born on anything pretty much. So we had to scrap that.
Interesting. Okay.
And
Right.
then Seventh Son was going to be the name of our first beer. Like Seventh Son of a Seventh Son is always good luck and folk tales and blues
Right.
songs and whatnot. Um, and we were finally driving around. I think we were driving back from visiting Great Lakes Brewing in Cleveland, like a pre brewery, check out other places, visit kind of thing. And we just landed on. We're like, well, let's just call it Seventh Son. It's good luck.
Right.
It's catchy in its own right, and from there, the rest is 9 years history.
Gotcha. And how did you guys go about funding your business?
So we got an SBA loan. It was around $600,000 total, but we needed to come up with a third of that from ourselves, and we didn't have any of that, or we didn't have that kind of money lying around at all. So we went to, luckily, almost all friends and family type investors or friends of friends. It's a group of 16 people that have been with us from the beginning. And we raised the equity from that, and then we ran out of money briefly, and did a Kickstarter for about another $30,000,
Okay.
which was, and Kickstarter back then, I think it still functions basically the same, but it's almost like merchandise pre-sale. Like here's a T-shirt, here's a pint of beer, here's a everything once we
Right.
open. we'll get you back there. So we raised about another 30 from the Kickstarter, and that was just barely enough to get the doors open, basically.
Well,
We
it
did a
looks
lot of
like it worked out.
years. Yeah, it all worked out in the end. But we got open, and I think our first 2 years we were just constantly dumping money back into the kind of building and the brewery itself. And in 2000, we got open and making beer in 2013, and then in 2015 we purchased there was an empty lot behind the brewery, which I kept driving up to this guy's house and dropping off notes on his mailbox and saying, hey, if you ever want to sell this, if you ever want to sell it. And finally, a developer offered him some money, and he said, well, if you can match what the developer was gonna give me, I'll sell it to you instead. So we got that land, and then worked out a whole nother like kind of second round of SBA funding and a larger loan to build a 15,000 square foot expansion onto our original 5,000 square foot building with kind of a proper brew house and workflow, and fixing a lot of the problems that we had initially when we really were just kind of shooting blind. And craft beer industry was a lot more in its infancy then too. There were consultants and trade shows and ideas, but when we went to a craft brewers conference, we were one of 2,000 breweries that were open rather than 9,000. So it was
Yeah, right.
smaller, and the knowledge base was a lot smaller about how to do things. So we definitely have learned a lot along the way.
I'm sure. And I always hear the saying, whatever you think it's going to cost to open a brewery, just double that.
Yeah.
That's what I hear all the time. So,
I mean, even back then, it was 6 or 650 to get open, and we could have spent all of $1 million easily, or like 1.1 or 2 million.
I'm sure. Uh, and about 3 years ago, I'm sure you were in. Well, what was it? 3 years ago or 2 years ago? 2 years ago? Yes, 2 years ago. Pardon me. It feels like it was 3 years ago, but COVID wound up hitting. How did that affect your business, and how did you guys go about pivoting to make it work for you?
So COVID hit us. That expansion that I talked about, we started on that in 2015, and it got open on our fifth anniversary in 2018. Part of that loan package and the project was also working on in another part of town. We're in Italian Village, and this was in German Village part of Columbus. Our Antiques on High Brewery, which is kind of our sour wild side. It has about 110 wine barrels repurposed for wort, and then three 20-barrel foeders also. But yeah, pretty much exclusively sour wild, and then it's got a tap room attached to it, about 4,000 square feet of rooftop patio and tap room. So that was all kind of part of it, and that just got open in late 2018. So 2019 was kind of our year that we're like, hey, we got a new business open, and we have this expansion open, and we just kind of got our feet under us. And 2020 was supposed to be like the year it all made sense,
Of
and
course.
everything was going to be working. And we were talking to, in another part of town, Dublin, Ohio, a suburb just to the north. We were talking to a developer there about doing a third kind of tap room space, which is now Getaway, but we kind of had that in the works too, and that was supposed to be done in 2020, and COVID just threw everything for a loop, and we didn't really, to be honest, with just finishing two projects, we hadn't built back up any type of like substantial cash reserves or anything. Like we were paying our bills and we were doing fine, but we were not ready to just close the doors overnight. So for us, it was a really big, giant pivot. How do we scramble and make this work without really cash reserves at all at that point? It turned into a lot of delivery. At one point, we were delivering about 100 to 150 cases of beer a day, and we managed to keep the tap room open with whatever employees were comfortable kind of just manning carry out.
Right.
Our brewers stayed employed the entire time, and really everybody who wanted to stay employed with us, we made it a point to make sure they had a job throughout.
That's great.
Yeah, yeah, we were proud of it. We have good people. But Yeah, it was a lot, and we couldn't have done it without. We genuinely couldn't have done it without the PPP assistance, without the idle loans, without we took advantage of every program that was out there to keep things afloat, and it's pretty much in the last 2 months, it's finally got to a point where like, oh, we're cash flow positive. The sun's out again in Columbus. There's not dining restrictions. People are finally coming out and feeling a little bit more comfortable. And it's only been just recently that we're like, hey, we're actually bringing in money again, finally.
Right.
So
Well, that's got to be a good feeling.
it's a very good feeling.
Right.
It's been a lot of sleepless nights in between.
I'm sure. Uh, Speaking of sleepless nights, you own four different businesses. uh, the Barrel and Bottle, which is a carry out. You said right, carry out.
Yeah, it's a carry out and bar and kind of the shared public market in Columbus, Ohio.
And then you
It's
have
obviously 1,000 square feet, but it's a awesome little shop.
right, and then you have three different breweries. You have Seven Sun, you have Antiques on High, and the Getaway.
Yes.
How do you go about balancing all of that and making sure that they all stay afloat and make sure they all work? And what kind of stress comes with that?
Uh, there's a decent amount of stress with it. It depends on what. It's just we've always tended to run things pretty lean in terms of like upper management. We trust our people a lot, and we give them a lot of autonomy to kind of do a good job, and we talk about things. We have a lot of meetings to check in on things, but we give people a lot of leeway to take care of themselves and do a good job. We put a lot of trust in them. But it's kind of a continual balancing act. Like we got used to having Seventh Son, then we got used to having Seventh Son with an extra 15,000 square feet and upping our production from 2,000 barrels to 6,000 barrels. And then we got used to having Antiques on High on top of that. And then we got used to COVID weirdness. And now we're
Correct.
getting used to having Getaway on top of that. So in terms of having three places operating and non-COVID, we're still only in a few months of that almost. Like it's still kind of the beginning. So we're still figuring out where we need more people or less people and how we can effectively use the people that we have. We have a ton of staff who they're a delivery driver, but they also do this, but they also do that, but they do this,
Of
and
course.
kind of piece together their 10 to 20 hours a week of 10 to 20 to 30 to 40 hours a week, and they kind of find their niche and just kind of make it work. So there's been a lot of that of people growing into roles and kind of making up the workload, and a lot of us trying to make sure that that our people are still happy and motivated, and we're not overusing anyone or like using it kind of that we're not burning people out or using them too hard.
Gotcha. So I know you had opened a business prior to opening Seven Sun, but when opening Seven Sun, what was something that you never thought you were going to have to deal with? If you can think back to that when we
Yeah,
first opened.
I think a lot of all the projects has been like I never knew I was going to have to be as much of a construction project manager, even though you technically have a general contractor. If you're not like the second in charge general contractor and constantly on top of things, like things just don't happen and fall by the wayside or don't happen the right way. Like I
Right.
didn't know how much like construction project management, and then the fact that we've almost been all the time continually expanding. It's like it hasn't really stopped. Like I would have had a little break, but I decided to. My family moved, and we did a rehab project on our house. So I've been almost continually under construction for like the last 9 years of my life, to some degree.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you go about balancing family and your businesses?
Um, I
How do you
just
make that work for you?
uh, I try to be upfront and honest about what I can and can't do. for both work and for business, and I apologize when I screw up, and that's about the best I have at this point. I've gotten a lot better. When we first started, it was one of those, like, I was working in the brewery and I was bartending a couple nights a week, and the restaurant I used to have, I would always bartend there. And back in my uh, younger days, I'm 44 now, so I had more kind of energy and time, and the bar thing was more fun. And but that definitely eats away a lot more family time. Now I'm still a solid like 50-ish hours a week, but most of those are daytime hours, so
Right.
it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. But then also my wife and I joke, and she's like, "Yeah, you know, I used to like it when you were gone a few nights a week. We got along better." I don't know
So
if
what do
you
you?
get the same thing from
Oh,
the fire.
I'm sorry. What'd you say?
Do you get the same thing from the fire duty, like being gone a few days a week or whatever?
Yeah, yeah.
The
So to speak, yes, for
Yeah,
sure. Being gone for 24 hours, and give them a little break.
yeah.
So, what do you think some good qualities to possess when being the owner of a brewery?
I think that um, I guess the most common thing for it now is like grits, definitely tenacity, whatever you want to call it. Just absolutely getting something done, figuring out a way to get it done, even if you get a bunch of things thrown at you, and just assuming that you will get things thrown at you. I think that's important, and kind of that project management, just being able to push through, whether it's on a sales side or tap room side or anything. It's all those same kind of qualities, and just empathy with for your staff and for the people that you're working with is super important, especially these days with kind of the. I feel like there's been an overall balance of power shift since COVID between employees and employers in a way, and there's a lot more expectation of a good a good job that pays decently, that people can expect to advance with, and it's you can't be you can't be an arm twister anymore. You gotta get everybody on the same team, and you gotta be able to understand everyone's position and really help other people succeed more so than just telling them what they have to do.
Gotcha. Let the people grow.
Yeah, because I mean, you get to a certain point, like I can't. There's no possible way I can do everything anymore. Like
Of
when you
course,
first start out, you can start to do a bunch of things and you can run yourself ragged, but at some point you gotta have the people in place.
for sure. And I'm sure you've been around in the 9 years that you've been in the brewing industry. You've been around a lot of people. But who do you think's inspired you the most in the beer industry?
Oh man, I really liked. I got the chance to have dinner with Steve Hindy one time, the Brooklyn Brewing
Okay.
founder, and he was awesome. Just a funny, interesting guy with a lot of good stories. And what were you talking? I'm assuming, I don't know his exact age, but I'm thinking he's probably about 25 years older than me or something. I'm drinking beers. I'm like, so do you still get hangovers after these things? Do you go like just
Are
yeah?
you immune yet?
Yeah, it was funny to just kind of think about yourself, and it's not that far away from me now. Actually, my business partner and I were just talking about like, where do we want to be 15 years from now? I'm going to be 60, and I'll
Right.
be that Steve Hindy, going around to beer dinners and inspiring people with my mild hangovers and stories and whatnot. So he
Yeah,
was a good
right.
one. Yeah.
And how do you define success? And is there a moment that you could think back on when you first opened Seven Sun that kind of things were going in the right direction? Maybe like an award or anything like that that kind of like sticks out in your head, a certain moment?
I don't know. You know, it hasn't been an award per se as much. It's probably been more just those. You kind of feel the when we get busy now. There's probably like 300 or 400 people in here sometimes.
Awesome.
Just on a nice day, having a beer, just that kind of energy you feel like that feels very successful, and it feels like if you if you go and the staff's having a good time and the people are having a good time, and you're like, hey, like drinking a beer is not solving world hunger necessarily or anything of that level, but you're providing a really valid, really like awesome outlet for people. It's nice.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. I'm sure I would feel the same way. Just looking around, realizing like you got all these people in here drinking something that you made. It's a pretty great
Yeah,
feeling.
it's a great feeling, and you
Yeah,
get the people, you get the customers who are the guests writing back in and saying like, "Oh, I met my fiance here," or "birthday here." It's nice.
that's great.
Yeah.
And like I had mentioned before, it's stressful owning, four businesses and trying to make everything work. But how important is a mental break for you, and what does that look like?
Uh, I don't do a good enough job of like completely disconnecting. Like I was even, um, my dad lives overseas, and I went to visit him recently for like uh, about 3.5, 3 weeks or so after COVID restrictions lifted a little bit, and I was still checking emails every day because I'm more of the person who's like, I'd rather it was only an hour or so, and I didn't really mind it, but I just didn't want to come back to a bunch of stuff like sitting
Of
in my
course.
inbox kind of thing. And I tend to do that on vacations, but I feel like I still get a pretty darn good like 22 or 23 hours of the day out of the vacation that's not that, so I don't mind too much. But I kind of like not completely just laying around on a beach or anything, but I got to have a beach and some water, and definitely about a 50-50 split between doing some activities that are pretty cool and just sitting and reading a book on the beach.
Right.
Uh, on more of a daily basis, I try and exercise pretty much every day. I think that gives my mind a real release and kind of break from things. And I'm a guitar hack, so I like to practice finger picking guitar styles. Is the other thing.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. And what do you think? Like I said, you've been open for 9 years. What do you think's been the biggest change in the industry in the last 5 years?
I mean, a couple things in terms of growth kind of explosion, but at the same time, uh, consumer fatigue is starting to set in too. So I think there's a huge, I mean, I think that curve has really shot up in the last 5 years or whatever. Like I said, I remember when we started, there were about 2,500, and now we're 9,200 breweries or whatever. When we started in Columbus, we were the seventh brewery open here, and now there's 50 in our county. Um,
Crazy.
yeah, so just kind of the numbers of breweries, and there used to really be a scarcity kind of driving things a lot, and you would even see it in beer fest. We just had one of our first beer fests back since COVID, and it was really interesting. Like a lot of people kind of had the same comments about it. They're like, oh, I used to come to these and try and find things that I couldn't find anywhere. Like that was kind of the appeal of it. But they're like, I've tried most of these beers now, so it's kind of interesting to try them side by side, and it's fun to see people. But it's just not the same as it used to be, and I think that's overall in craft beer. That's a lot of what it is. Like most towns have everywhere. You can buy a good IPA from someone that's
Right.
fresh and local, and there's both. And now there's even like good hazies everywhere and good West Coast everywhere, and there's probably decent sour beers in most every city you can go to also. And it just wasn't like that at all. There was still such a kind of oh, can you find that one special beer? Can you now? There's a lot of good special beers everywhere, and I think there's more focus on like the if you want to call it the brand or the experience or the brewery as a whole, and it's the liquid and the beer in the glass first and foremost, but it's also just kind of the overall vibe when you find something really special, like when you go to a town and you find the really cool brewery that's there. It's not
Right.
just what's in the glass, it's also like what kind of space did they create and what kind of vibe did they create.
Right.
And that's changed because it used to just be much more simple, like, oh my god, there's a good IPA here, and it's more than
Of
that now.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to go, obviously, get it when I'm first getting into the whole craft beer thing, going to, the beer festivals that they used to have, and it was breweries you never heard of before, and then as time went on, it was like you would go to them and you'd be like, pretty much tried all these beers before, but now it's more along the lines of like the special invites that certain breweries do, like when they have those festivals where
Yeah,
they invite those certain breweries that they like, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I got to go to this one.
yeah.
That's the things to look forward to now.
We're getting ready to go out to Boulevard. Their head brewer, Stephen Powell's, who's been with them for a while, who's just a super awesome guy. His son goes to Ohio State. So we ended up meeting him here, and he likes our brewery a lot, and we've just stayed in touch with him and everything. But we just got the invite to go out to their kind of invite special fest out there, and I'm really looking
Very
forward
cool.
to it. Yeah.
I'll be actually going to one in Pawtucket for that Finback is holding.
Oh, cool.
In this
I love their beers whenever I've had their beers.
Yeah, they're really good. They're actually like a mile away from me, so I'm there all the time.
That's great.
Kind of in my backyard, so. And
Yeah.
speaking of, what was your gateway beer into the craft beer world?
So my gateway beer, um, when I was 16 years old, my brother was 21, and I took his birth certificate and social security card to the license bureau, and I got my picture, and I looked like I was about 10, and I got my picture on a state ID. And then I went to, that was also at that time, I decided to be kind of adventurous, and I got really into the Grateful Dead, and I would go on Grateful Dead tour in the summer times, and I would sell beer and grilled cheese on Dead tour, and Deadheads were way ahead of the curve in terms of good beer. So even back in the day,
Right.
um, you would see way more, and it was Sierra Nevada Pale and Sammy Smith for the dark side of things, like Sammy Smith Oatmeal Stout and Sierra Nevada Pale, and they were all over every Dead show lot that you would go to, and that's really what got me into beer. Like I was way ahead of all my other friends who were still just like kind of trying to find Natty Light on the weekends from
Yeah,
somewhere.
right.
I was going all around the country and finding like Sam Adams and Pete's Wicked and this and that and whatever I could fit in a cooler. But Sierra Nevada and Sam Smith Oatmeal Stout's what stands out.
Sam Smith oatmeal stout, very good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I used to love that.
Yeah.
Um, so, what's next for your brewery, or all three of your breweries? What does the future look like?
I think a lot of what the last handful of years have been for us of like let's put these three breweries together and let's get everything working. And now it's going to become more of an issue of we have more capacity. We're up to about 7,000 barrels uh, in our production facility, and we can probably get up to 12 or so without straining too hard, but we want to make sure it's what we want to make and it's beer that makes sense to make, not just trying to push something out to the market for the sake of doing it. So seeing how we can grow our production side in a way that makes sense, and just how we can really make our spaces and tap rooms make sense and work together. We've been trying, since everything does have a different name rather than just like Seventh Sun 1, Seventh Sun 2, Seventh Sun 3,
Right.
uh, even though we're well known in Columbus and we feel like it's fairly well known, there's still not everybody connects that we're one business, which is kind of fun. But it's also something that we're like, this year we're gonna try and tell people a little bit more about how we're actually like one brewery that is a part of all these three awesome individual unique breweries, and just kind of grow that side of it. We've looked at doing some Airbnb stuff just for fun for each of the spots, as something that will be more of an experience of the brewery itself, and something
I
we
like
can
that. Sounds
great for
cool.
people. Yeah, I think it's gonna be great, and like ways for when people come into town to really like experience what we have going on, and so that's a little bit of something. But a lot of it is just kind of making sure we have our feet under us and everything's working right, and that we have a stable, happy crew, and hopefully that we have a good couple years of solid business.
Fingers crossed for you, man.
Thanks,
Fingers
man.
crossed.
Yeah.
So, if somebody come to you, which I'm sure this happens all the time, but if somebody had come to you and asked you for advice on opening their own brewery, what would you tell them?
For pretty much any business thing, I always tell people like, "Are you sure you want to turn your hobby into your job?" Like it makes you look at the world differently, and you'll never get the same experience from drinking a beer as a civilian, I guess, or whatever you'd want to call it,
Right.
as you would from a being a brewery owner, and that's good and bad. But make sure that makes sense, and then also like really look at it like we build equity, or we've been building equity, and we're financially solvent right now, and doing okay on everything. But there's a lot of brewery owners I know who, there's actually a brewery here in town that just recently closed down, or kind of half sold, changed hands. But it was a guy who was an architect. I think he was an architect. One of the other partners, similar kind of professional career, and they did it for 5 or 6 years, and just kind of realized like they were making more money and having more fun, not being a brewery owner, and it was just taking up too much time. And like
Right.
genuinely think about what you're trying to get out of owning your own business, whether it's a brewery or another business, and whether you're cut out for the kind of 24/7 of it, and it's not always as financially rewarding as a lot of people make it out to be. It's kind of like being a rock star. Like the rock stars, the actual guys make a lot of money, but a lot of people are just working musicians who don't necessarily see those
Of
rewards.
course.
It can be the same for brewery owners, or I guess any business. Like
Right.
yeah.
Gotcha. Good advice. And did you happen to have a funny story for us?
I was trying to think. I don't know if it's super laugh out loud funny, but just kind of funny about the brewing world. Like everything seems to have the same. Every name's been taken now for beers, especially, and even brewery names. We found out really early on because we are Seventh Son spelled out, SON at the end, but we have some Florida buddies that are seven VENTH and then SUN. We started almost the exact time. They trademarked their symbol, but not their name. Um, our lawyers barked back and forth at each other for 5 or 6 months. I think we each spent a few $1,000s on it, and then just decided to agree to disagree. And I think we were both like had more important things to fix and spend money on rather than trademark. Uh, I think 5 years later, 6 years later, we're at a Akron Hall of Fame football, or in Canton at a football stadium, Akron Hall of Fame beer fest, and had the pleasure of meeting Devin in person. She had divorced her husband at the time and was hanging out with her mom, and we talked about the whole thing and did some tequila shots and decided that we need to do a collaboration beer. And it was all kind of silly in the beginning, and
Right.
it's the kind of thing that I've always loved about craft beer. Like it's genuinely a good group of people, good business to work in. It's awesome. There's things that are really great about it,
I
but it's just
agree.
kind of funny how things can get so blown out of proportion, and then you sit down and have some drinks with somebody, and it all works out.
It's great about beer.
Yeah.
Doesn't get much better than that.
Yep.
So I have a little segment called Quick Fire Five.
All right.
5 quick questions, beer related.
I'm ready.
Ready? Somebody comes into your brewery. What is one of the beers you recommend they try?
Cumulus Nimbus was one of our first recipes. We've done very mild tweaks to it over time, but I think it is one of the best pale ales in the country. Stands up to anything. We blind taste it against Zombie Dust and Daisy Cutter and beat it all the time, even though it'll never get the press, or it'll never get that much hype, but it's a
Right.
damn good beer. It's an awesome beer.
All right. Um, if you can collaborate with any other brewery on a beer, who would it be?
Oh shit. Uh, I would probably just go old school for the pleasure of like, if I could do. I got to meet Ken Grossman one time. if I could do a beer with Sierra Nevada just for the sake of like we were talking, it was one of my first craft
Right.
beers ever. I would choose that. There's
Nostalgic.
definitely people who make cool beer who would be fun to just work with, but if it was like a bucket list thing, I'd love
Right.
to work with Ken to some degree.
Gotcha. Uh, Favorite style of beer?
Favorite style of beer would have to still be IPA. I drink all over the place depending on the season
Right.
and everything else, but there's just something about the pungency of like a well-made IPA, the way it makes your mouth water, the way the hops hit you, like you can't beat it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm between that and stouts. Uh,
Yeah, yep, yep.
Favorite name you've come up with for one of your beers?
Actually, I'm gonna default to. Well, okay. I'm gonna default to Humulus Nimbus because that was my. I think only about 10% of our brewery names are mine, and probably like 70% are brewmaster, whose name is also Collin. He
Yes.
thinks a ton of them. But so I like Cumulus Nimbus, and then we did a porter called Grave Blanket that I always liked because it's a nobody had done it, which I was kind of shocked at the time, and it just seemed that I always like the deep dark kind of stout references. We have one that Colin named called Oubliette, which is an awesome stout name. Oubliette's the French word for a dungeon where they would throw people to forget about them. So
Okay.
that seemed appropriate. But
Very
yeah,
cool.
there's a bunch of good ones.
I like it. And you have one keg of beer to hold you over for a 2-week quarantine. What beer are you choosing?
One keg of beer for 2 weeks. We started doing and I'm going to assume this is right now where it's starting to warm up. So I'm going to go with we do a rice lager that we started making for
Okay.
Getaway, because which has been really nice. Like we never really made a lot of lagers before, and it's been a blast to get into that more. So it's this kind of rice-based lager. Kind of Americanized noble hops a little bit, but pretty subtle and just super refreshing and awesome. So it's called Tuk Tuk. I would take right now. I would take a keg of Tuk Tuk for a couple weeks.
Gotcha. Colin, that's all I got for you, man. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for talking, and I'm glad we worked out the scheduling stuff. And keep doing what you're doing, man.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm Mike Curtin for the Brew Old Order podcast. Here with Collin Castore, co-owner of Seven Sun Brewing Companies in Columbus, Ohio. Thank you, man.